Today's guest is Ingrid Larragoity. She is the executive director of El Sistema Colorado.
Ay, muy bien.
Ooh, boy, I'm saying that good, which is a string orchestra and music education program from ages, she said, 2.5 to 18 years old. Ingrid, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
We're so
I'm excited to share.
I know we were talking a lot off air, just getting into the conversation before we could give it to you, the listeners, because it's such an endeared topic to me and I think to Lamali as well, and I think for our listeners. So tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, I've been in music all of my life. I started piano when I was 4 in Jersey and New York area, and grew up around, New Yorkville and New York City and fantasized about it all my life and didn't know that I was going to be in music. And then I started getting serious about it and then went to school for it. And I got my doctorate here in Colorado.
Nice.
In conducting and music. And so I was in academia most of my life, teaching high school band and orchestra and then teaching collegiately college band and orchestra. And then a few years ago, I left the teaching career. I retired teaching and had done it for 25 years.
That's a long time. Yeah.
And I found myself in a space where I had all this information and experience, and it was time for me to give back in a different way. I think teachers give back daily, but I wanted to do it in a very specific way and connect with people who don't have access. And so I decided to move into the nonprofit world with El Sistema Colorado, and it gave me that platform in a beautiful way.
Yeah, and then it's about the children, right? The kids from age 2.5 to 18, where you give them education about music. I'm sure it's a love thing for you, right? A passion thing. You mentioned that off air. Talk about that. What that does for you. How that fulfills you to be able to do this.
Well, it fulfills me in a lot of different ways. I mean, I'm always about music. I think anything I've ever done is through music and for music and because of music.
Yeah.
And seeing students and knowing through the Western European classical music, which is what I'm about, that we've isolated a lot of other people, and having the opportunity to help others reach music without barriers. And that's our slogan, music without barriers.
I love that.
Right? Because we're constantly trying to tear them down. And kids, as we know, at 2.5, they're amazing, brilliant souls that are constantly creating and singing and making sounds and wanting to be active, and some of them don't get that opportunity. So we have an early childhood program so that lower socioeconomic families can start at 2.5, and really what we want to do is provide for these students from the get-go so that if they want it, it's there for them and they can develop through that, and so they can go all the way through high school. And we do strings specifically because strings are dying in Denver public schools.
Interesting.
So, and it's not because of lack of interest. It's just not in the infrastructure of the schools with all of the funding. And that's a different podcast, I'm sure.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at this and I see, you guys focus, like you said, on string instruments and orchestra, and the community you serve is largely BIPOC. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how you make, because when I think of orchestra, I think of like Tchaikovsky and all these names I can't pronounce.
Guys.
Yeah. How do you make that culturally relevant to your people?
It's naturally. We have all sorts of composers from all around the world. They just haven't been elevated to the point that we know who they are. In the last 10 years of this wokeness, these people have existed and lived, and we're just now like, oh, let's pick this composer. So we have Florence Price, who changed music for classical music. We have Coleridge. We have William Grant Still. So a lot of what we do, Gabriella Lena Frank, who's alive and amazing if you don't know who she is, who are composing right now music that's relative to our students. And I mean, our students see those composers. They get to work with some of them. They play their music. So that it's not just, of course, Beethoven and Mozart. And I mean, it's a Western white European art form, so we're celebrating that, but it doesn't mean that it's not all over the world, and it doesn't have all these different flavors, and oftentimes it's appropriate, right? But we can go to the source, and so our students get to play all of those composers, and different genres too. We do some jazz, we do salsa, we had a collaboration with a Colorado Mambo Orchestra, which I know is always a Kubo jazz, and our kids got to play that, and so they see their instruments through all sorts of different channels. The people who have limited that is us, society, right?
Yeah.
But we're taking those barriers down. And one of the biggest barriers for our students is not the making connections with BIPOC composers, because we do that well in our building from 2.5 on up, is making it free. And that's a huge, huge deal for us. We're the only 100% free music education program in the state of Colorado. So the kids don't pay for instruments, they don't pay for the lessons, they don't pay to come to the classes, they don't pay for the experiences, the buses, the t-shirts. We feed them every day. Like, they don't pay for any of it because we don't want the families to feel like they can't participate.
That's beautiful. And it definitely, like in the schools, it is a barrier, like, well, I can't afford a violin or, trombone or whatever. So that you provide that is like so powerful.
Well, that's the equity piece. So we sit in that intersection of social justice and equity for music education, because we're removing those barriers that make it inequitable, where there's a kid in Cherry Creek that's been taking lessons since they were 4 years old. A violin lesson right now with a great teacher is anywhere between $65 and $85 an hour.
Wow.
Right? And then plus the parent has to take them in and out, and then plus the experiences. And for a lot of families, that's something that they can do. For a lot of families that have the interest, they can't do that. They can't afford that. And so we are striving to provide that access so that when they leave our program, they can choose to do it. We're not making robots like, you don't have to be a musician, but you have it there for you.
It's there.
And we're developing the access for you to do it.
And see, again, I'm endeared by this because I played instruments when I was growing up in Detroit as a young kid. I just loved music, listening to music all the time, went to bed with music, woke up with music, so on and so forth. And then one day went to school and I wanted to try the band. And the instructors put a saxophone in my hand. He said, put your right hand here, put your left hand here. And I was hooked from it. So it was the exposure, being able to, be exposed to instrument, and then I fell in love with it in music in a different way, because music is so much deeper than what we hear or on the surface, and I love that. So I'm endeared by this, and I think being able to expose your kids to these arts, or the arts in general, but music is one of the best gifts you could ever give them.
Absolutely. And we work really hard in our building that we connect our kids not just to their instruments, but their instruments in Denver and how that shows up, right? I think a lot of institutions have learned that their impact is giving free tickets to our community, right? Oh, here's a free ticket, come. And then it should be so special for you. I have a free ticket. And then they don't show up and they're like, why didn't they come? And it's because they don't see themselves in those spaces. Right. So that's another aspect that's important about our program, where we take them to Betcher and they know how to go into the practice rooms and into the back rooms and backstage, and they feel a part of the fiber of Betcher Hall and of the Colorado Symphony, so much so that they know their way around and their family knows their way around. So now they go on their own. I'll go on a weekend and I'll see 4 or 5 of my families that bought tickets and went.
I love that.
And it's about creating a space for them in Denver that they see themselves as valued and as important and as welcomed, and making those spaces just as BIPOC and just as diverse on a daily basis, not just on MLK Day, not just on Latin Nights Day. It's about the year, right? And stop segregating these events to just one ethnicity, and knowing that we're all living together, right? And that they're important.
Well, and you're right that in order to feel like you belong in some of these spaces, I come from a theater background, it's the same problem, you have to see yourself on both sides of the stage, right? Like, why would I go to like some play that has nothing to do with me or my experience, and I'm not seeing anyone up there that looks like me, so you don't feel like you belong in the seats either. And then to have some of the composers that you're including be people that are relevant to our communities as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about the 2.5-year-old doesn't know Beethoven, also doesn't know Florence Price, right? So, and they don't know that there's any one of them have any more value than the other. So I think if they start learning and absorbing this information and those sounds, and they're very different sounds from all these composers, right? They all have their language, that they develop a love for music, regardless of what that looks like. And yeah, seeing themselves on stage is a huge deal. Right now, I think the last report from American orchestras, professional orchestras, is 84% of professional orchestras in America are still white. 84% of those population. So we're skipping a gap. There's steps that we haven't taken that have made the pathway to these places, and I think that work that we're doing in our building is really important. Besides the community, besides like the loving people that we have, and the families and the kids, and the events that we have. I mean, we welcome the community. We want people to be there, and we have a beautiful group of people that don't always feel comfortable going to these spaces.
And it says here you've served over 1,500 youth throughout Denver. That's amazing. Can you speak a little bit to what you've seen in the children, the kids that come through the change and what it does for them, and how you can actually see that growth and that, that maturation in this space?
I think the biggest thing is seeing them value themselves and advocate. We always have like the staff, when a kid comes up and asks for something, we're always like, oh my gosh, they came and asked for it, right? Because I think they've been scared into following a path, right? Like, this is what you're supposed to do, only speak when spoken to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a very kind outlook at these generations. We call them soft, we call them fragile, we call them all these things because we don't understand them generationally. Right. But they're actually beautiful souls, and they have all the right things inside of them. And so when they can break their own veil, and we provide a space for them to do that, it's a beautiful culture. In our building, we serve over 40 zip codes. So we're not servicing a school. We have kids from all different schools and all over the greater Denver area. When they come in, they build their own culture. So they make it comfortable for each other. They take care of each other. They've made this microcosm, this little world that, wow, what a sneak peek for me to be able to see what they've done and how they've created a really great world that could be an example for a workplace, instead of the typical DEI thing that everybody has to do. These kids are doing it, and they're doing it authentically, and they're doing it through music, right? So I think the biggest thing for us is getting our students to use their voice, to advocate for themselves and to value themselves. And we just happen to do it through music.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's amazing, I think, like how much we don't recognize the arts are bigger than art. It's like it teaches you creativity. So even if your students don't continue on with being musicians, like their minds have opened up in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. And their confidence too. I love that.
Well, art is contextual, right? We see it in film, we see it in visual art, we see it in dance, we see it in theater, and we see things that are happening in the world in a film, and we can connect to that. Oh my gosh, my family did that, my this, my that. And we want them to say that they can do that. We want them to feel like they can tell their story as well, and it's valued, and that people want to see it, and they want to see them succeed, and they want their place in Denver or anywhere else they go, right? It doesn't matter.
I love that. Okay, so let's give the people the vitals. If they're interested, where you're located, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so we're in Curtis Park. We're in a corner right across the street from Curtis Park, 29th and Curtis Park. And anybody's welcome. If you go to our website, it's elsistemacolorado.org. Every piece of information, our calendars in there, our mission statement, what we do, but more importantly, how you can get involved. And running this program costs us right now for 270 students, $810,000 a year to provide barrier-free music education.
Wow.
So you can donate on there. You can become a monthly donor. You could join our board, which we'd love to have you come and be interested in joining our board. The application's online. You can come volunteer. And we use all sorts of volunteers. Help landscaping, help painting the building. We had a great company last year come and just paint the building for us, which is so nice, so that they didn't have to come out of our budget. Or volunteer with helping at an event or a concert or a fundraiser. There's so many ways that people can get involved, and I think a lot of times people wait till they have their own kids, and that's when you can see the value of what's going on, or you can see the gap. Oh my gosh, this school, I chose this school because this school doesn't have the choices, right? And then you got to think, well, who are the kids that are going to this school that don't have the choices, right? So get involved. There's a way for you to get involved, and it doesn't have to take 30 hours a week. You know, it could be 5 hours a month. It could be 3 hours a month, and if it's not with El Sistema Colorado, it's with somebody that you could really make an impact with.
And there's a big procedure for, parents to bring their kids. Is it a screening process? Excuse me. How does that work?
For the only thing we connect the parents to in a very important way is attendance. So if we're going to give you 100% free music education, you got to show up. And we have an 86% attendance rate. We have a 91% retention rate year to year. So we're growing faster than we can fund. So that's a little scary right now. We're at a point where our building is going to hold only so much more, and our funding is going to hold only so much more.
You're growing. That's a good thing. Yeah.
And it is. I mean, there's no lack of children interested in being creative and artistic.
That's true.
So if we can help in any way as a community to embrace that so that they can cross over, to adulthood with that already embedded, well, that's great.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Ingrid Larragoity, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
said it
it.
right. Okay. El Sistema Colorado, the website again is?
ElSistemaColorado.org.
Okay, if you're interested, please go check out the website. Thank you for sharing this information. We want to try and help you get that out there because this is an important mission. So thank you for serving this great community.
Thank you all for having us.